When I speak about inspiration and purpose, I frequently hear people ask, but what if I don't really know what would inspire me? Or, how do I find my purpose when nothing seems to resonate with me at the level of bliss you speak about? That's why this particular part of this program and the following ones are dedicated to my heartfelt answers to these questions, which seem most bothersome to those who'd really love to heed their ultimate calling. Just the mere act of questioning our ability to live an inspired life represents resistance that we need to examine because it implies that we're deficient in our spiritual quest. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. In the world of spirit from whence we came, there are no deficits, no lacks or shortages, and there's definitely no such thing as purposelessness. This is an intelligent system that we're a part of. We're divine beings who are a piece of the entire pie of creation. By questioning our ability to activate a connection to inspiration, we give evidence of our lack of belief in our divinity. With this minor reproach in mind, I'll now explain ways to believe in and connect with your ultimate calling. First, in order to put to rest any question regarding your personal right to live an inspired life, we must claim our own divinity, all of us. The fundamental truth each of us needs to affirm is, I am a divine creation. All creation has purpose. I am here to be like God. We should tattoo this statement on our consciousness and wear it proudly. We must begin the process of getting in spirit with a firm declaration from which we never waver. Once we've accepted this, we can move on to knowing why we're here and what inspires us. We can begin to trust in the intelligence that beats our heart 50 or 60 times every minute and at the same time turns the earth once every 24 hours, keeps the planets aligned, and creates every millisecond. Our job is to be as much like the source of all beings as we can be. And the nagging question about what inspires us and why we're here dissolves in this grand desire. Once we declare our holy divine nature to be our essence, rather than something to be verified, it all seems so obvious. The journey to feeling purposeful and inspired begins by seeking to be like God in all of our thoughts and all of our actions. Every one of us is capable of being inspired every day of our life. After all, this is our entitlement, offered by God, with whom we collaborated before ever arriving here in the first place. Blocking the bliss of inspiration. Basically, we have two choices for meeting any problem that seems to be blocking us from the bliss of inspiration. The first is the way of frailty, in which we assure ourselves that we're weak and incapable. Frustration, grief, fears, and tears are the hallmarks of this choice, wherein we attempt to cure a wrong with another wrong. The frailty method multiplies tensions by focusing on what's missing, and often invites the advice of others in an attempt to resolve our inner tension and lack of inspiration. The second choice is to go within and know that at our core, beyond all physical and mental factors, there resides the spirit that's always connected to God. Any problem, and I emphasize any problem, represents our inability to consciously connect to our source in the moment. With a conscious connection, we don't seek the advice of others, we seek information. So our decisions are made between ourselves and our Creator. We frequently have quiet interchanges with God, and we know and trust that spiritual guidance is available as an alignment of energy. When we feel inspired, we recognize that we need to make a vibrational adjustment that puts our thoughts and behaviors back in alignment with the desire to be inspired. Then, when this realignment takes place, we can laugh at the folly of seeking something outside of ourselves, such as an activity or a job, to inspire us. By simply realigning and harmonizing with Spirit, we let inspiration blossom in the field of harmony. Listening to the voice of God. When we make the decision to become a being of sharing and practice keeping our thoughts harmonized with spirit energy on a daily basis, our purpose will not only find us, it will chase after us wherever we go. Since we've become aligned with our Creator, we won't be able to escape it. You see, when we live as much of life as possible in God realization, nothing can go wrong. What and who we need will surface, and we'll notice that we can't escape feeling that something much greater than our individual life is at work within us and around us. Our number one relationship must be to this creative energy of God. When we go to our source, we activate the energy that reconnects us to our purpose. Inspiration then shows up right before our eyes, even when we may have stopped thinking about it. Our purpose manifests in many ways and won't be limited to a career slot. In fact, it's often something that requires us to leave a particular kind of employment to pursue something we'd never even considered before. We must trust that inspiration is already here. It only eludes us because we've disconnected in some way from the spirit that was and always will be our essence.
So many people are consumed by their past and living as if the things that happen to them in their life are the reasons why their life isn't going the way they would like it to go today. I'd like to suggest to you that in this principle, which I call giving up your personal history, I'd like to suggest to you that all of that is wonderful to talk about in therapy, and you can get a lot of help literally for going back and examining the things in your past that perhaps are troubling for you. But the illusion is that these are the things or the reasons why your life is not working the way you would like it to work today. That is the illusion. It's the illusion that Alan Watts spoke about when he used the metaphor of the wake of the boat. That the wake of a boat is nothing more than the trail that is left behind. If you stand on the back of a speedboat and watch it, it's a wonderful metaphor. You can get that picture in your head. You can simply see how it is all just a trail that is left behind. And if you ask yourself, what's driving the boat? What's making it go forward? The answer is that what's making it go forward is the present moment energy that is being generated by the engine in this moment, now. And that's the only thing that can make the boat go forward. And the most important question to ask yourself about this little metaphor is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? Can a wake, that is, can a trail that is left behind make a boat go forward? And of course the answer to that is no, and thus it is also true for your life. That the wake of your life is also a trail that is left behind. And this trail that is left behind is just that. It is not what is making you inefficient, poor, unhappy, depressed, stressful, sick, in bad relationships, and so on. Even though we like to think that, and we like to put the responsibility for those things on all of these events that took place in our past, the fact is, the way I look at the past, is that everything that happened to us in the past had to happen in order for us to be where we are today. And the evidence that I have for that is that it did. And there's nothing else to say about it. It did, and it can't be undone. 1,000 years ago, a man named Omar Khayyam, who was a tent maker in the Muslim world, observed, "The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Nor all thy piety nor wit can lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out one word of it." He knew that in the Middle Ages. And yet we've got people who are consumed with the belief that because of the way you treated me, because of what you said to me, because of how I was abandoned, because of how I was abused, because of how I was ignored, because of my past, that I lived in this particular set of circumstances or that these are the reasons why my life is not going the way I would like it to go today. And if there's any advice that I think will help you to get onto the extra mile where it's not very crowded, it came to me from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who I was reading something that he had written in a book called The Fire from Within. And he said, "One day, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history." He said, "And just like drinking, I gave it up. And he said that, and only that, has made all the difference in my life. So that all of these things and all of these events that transpired, that took place up until now, all you can do to them is thank you. And I'm talking about all of it. Thank you for abandoning me. Thank you for the abuse. Thank you for the struggles. Thank you for all of it, because it is out of those falls and out of those struggles and all of those difficulties that I generated the energy to propel myself to a higher place. And without those falls, without those struggles, without those difficulties, I wouldn't be able to get to the place I am today.
Let me share with you from my heart. I have 6 daughters and 2 sons, but I have a 16-year-old daughter, the only child that we have, who has taken a different path in her life. And we've struggled with it. And she had a very serious automobile accident. She had to be cut out of the car. She has taken a path of drinking and experimenting in drugs and so on. And I know that this is a path, and it's a very painful path, and she's had some very difficult times with it. And she's got a whole thing about authority and doing things her own way and so on. And I understand it, because I've lived it my whole life. And every time, I must say that in the last 3 or 4 months, there's been just incredibly dramatic shifts in our life. And it's because there has been a shift in how I and my wife are dealing with this. And I used to, when I would think about her, I would be filled with rage and filled with pain. And I would be tearful, and I'd be angry at the dumb choices that she would make and the things that she would do that just didn't seem to make sense. And I don't know if you've raised teenage daughters, but I saw a wonderful title for a book about raising teenage daughters. It said, Get Out of My Life. That was the title. But first, drive me and Cheryl to the mall. All right? It's a great book, by the way. And so I would be in my mind, and I'd be thinking about it, and I would try meditating, and I'd try working on it, and so on. And nothing seemed to work. And then I began to study this Foundations of Mysticism, this series of lectures by Joel Goldsmith, this great healer, lived back in the 1950s, wrote the Parentheses in Eternity and the Infinite Way. Wonderful, wonderful readings. He was a Christian Scientist and a very big supporter of chiropractic as well. And he talked about how we nullify disorder, disease, disharmony, and so on. And that, a reminder, the spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. These words that I say unto you are spirit. And he said, getting down on your knees and asking God to heal you, or getting down on your knees and asking God to grant you abundance where scarcity resides, getting down on your knees and asking God for anything is a foolish mission. Because the assumption behind asking God to give you something is that God already has it, but he's holding it back. He said, Luke 15:31 says, all that I have is thine. It's all yours already. And you are already connected to all that I have. And God, he said, isn't going to be doing anything different 1 hour from now than God is doing now. And God isn't going to be doing anything different an hour from now than God was doing 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. God is the infinite now. Don't assume that God is a withholding God. If I had the keys to healing you, to giving you abundance, to giving you a great relationship, to providing a job for you, whatever it is that you would like, and I held it all back, unless you begged for it or obeyed the rules that I said you must obey, you would say, you know, you're really not even a very nice person, let alone a very nice God. He said you must know that you're connected to it already, and that the disease, the disharmony, the discord will be nullified, will be wiped out when you bring spirit to it. And as I would think about my daughter and the rage, I would feel myself as I was plugged into the physical, the laws of the material. And I would, in my own mind, I would unplug myself from the material and I would plug myself into God. It's a wonderful mental image when things aren't going the way you would like them to go. Just unplug yourself from the laws of the physical, especially where there's disharmony, disorder, disease, and plug into God. And what you do when you plug into God is you bring love, you bring pardon, you bring hope, you bring joy, you bring fulfillment to that, and you correct the error, and it's gone. I had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer and told that she had just a few months to live. And she knew that she was in disharmony. And she didn't even tell her parents. She didn't tell anyone. She knew what she had to do. She had read all the spiritual literature. She had immersed herself in meditation and deep prayer. But still, she was surrounded by and contaminated by the energy field of those who were living in fear and without faith. And she left and she rented a cabin up in Wisconsin, in northern Wisconsin. And she went there all alone. And in the process, what she knew she had to do for 8 to 10 hours a day, every day, was to just reconnect to her source. And in the process of doing this, of just communing with God and just bringing peace, she came back from there a cleansed and whole person, and a healed person as well. It is in the bringing of spirit to disease. And that's why I say and said to you at the very beginning, you must be operating at a different level.
And while I don't think that it's very possible for most of us to ever completely get rid of this ego, as long as we're incarnated into a human form, I do believe that it is possible for us to tame it and to make it less of a dominant force in our lives by no longer having such an important role placed on being right and making other people wrong. One of the ways to begin to work at treasuring your divinity is to practice being kind rather than being right in as many occasions as you possibly can. And you have lots of opportunities to do this on a daily basis. Thousands of them show up in little tiny interactions in virtually every place you go, with strangers, with your children, with your spouses, on the telephone, ordering something in a restaurant, whatever. There's always this part of us that is the ego that wants to be right, that wants to make the dust rise from the earth with your swagger. And you know, after a while, you start noticing it. You start observing it. As your own ego becomes less and less of a dominant force in your life, you start to notice how much other people's ego is playing such a role, how much strutting there is, how much posturing there is, how much bragging takes place. You can see it in body language. You can see it in the way that people deal with each other. You can see it in lines at the grocery store. You can see it when you're trying to get your ticket straightened out at the airport, whatever it might be. There's this placing somebody else in a position of inferiority, and you are here to do this for me, and I'm more important than. And it isn't said that way, but it's sort of communicated. And you think to yourself that all of these people, I do it all the time, all of these people are nothing more than me in an earlier time in my life. That this is the way I was. I see it in my past relationships. I see it in the way that I dealt with my children years ago and the way that I deal with them now. I see it in noticing that it's easier now for me to be kind and to suspend being right. And I'm right almost all the time. But I no longer need to point it out, except for right now, of course. But the idea that even if you know that when you're talking to someone that they're completely wrong, if you can suspend the need to point it out and instead just say something kind back in response, if you can just practice doing that wherever you are, those are points towards treasuring your divinity. It's not about worshiping more. It's not about getting down on your knees and practicing somebody else's orthodoxy. It's not about fitting in. It's not about memorizing verses out of the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or whatever. It's not about that. It's about practicing being Christ-like rather than Christian. It's about practicing being Buddha-like rather than Buddhist. It's about practicing being Muhammad-like rather than Muslim. Muhammad said, don't even harm any tree that has a green leaf growing on it. If there's a green leaf growing on it, don't harm it. Practice that. That kind of love and admiration for humanity. Live as much as you can those principles. And all it amounts to is simply beginning a process of moving out of the lowest levels of consciousness. The lowest level of consciousness is ego consciousness. Ego, some have suggested EGO, is an acronym for edging God out. That as you edge God out of your life, what you have done is you have separated yourself from your divinity, believed that you are those 6 things, separate from everyone, separate from what you would like to attract into your life, separate from God, your reputation. You start believing that this is who you are, and you start living this way, and you look upon your divinity as something that is out there that you'll see, you'll talk to on at the synagogue on Saturday or at church on Sunday morning or whatever. And you'll practice during certain days, like we call, at the end of the year, 30 days of fasting, and this makes me, closer to God and so on. To me, it's about applying the principles of moving past ego consciousness. And when I see conflicts between one group and another, men versus women, when I see conflicts between people who are older and people who are younger, when you see conflicts existing between people who have one color skin and a different color of skin, when you see conflicts between people who wear a robe versus those who wear a yarmulke, when you see all of these divisions, and there are just endless numbers of them that we pigeonhole ourselves into, they are still the cause of virtually all conflicts on the planet. We still are dividing ourselves. We don't understand that this is a round planet, and on a round planet, there's no choosing up sides. There are no sides.
Mindfulness just is, here's one of the Thich Nhat Hanh's quotes. He says, walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet. It's a practice of putting your mind and your consciousness onto exactly where you are in the moment and being able to find beauty. It's one of the great teachings that I learned as a young man is that looking at beauty in the world is the very first step in purifying the mind. To be able to find beauty. I remember the story I told of Viktor Frankl when I was with him in 1978 on a panel in Vienna. The great Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and he said that they would give. We had lunch after that, just the two of us. I was very, very touched, and it was one of the most memorable moments of my life. And he said to me, when we were given a bowl of dirty water with a floating fish head in it, and that was our protein for the day. And he said, you had to be able to find a way to find beauty in that. He said, when we're challenged with circumstances over which we have absolutely no control, that we're challenged to change ourselves. And instead of looking at this as poor me and this shouldn't be happening and isn't this awful, but looking at it in terms of this is where I am. This is where I am in this moment. And in this moment, I'm going to find beauty in this and be in a state of appreciation for this fish, for it's giving its life to me. It's allowing me to survive and so on. And he said the people, he told me, and I'll never forget this, he said the people in the concentration camps, this was in Auschwitz, in Poland, he said the people who couldn't find beauty in the circumstances that they were in, the horrible circumstances that they were in, he said they would always perish. He said, you've got to be able to see beauty. The famous line from John Keats in Ode on a Grecian Urn, beauty is truth, and truth is beauty. That's all you need to know on earth. That's all you know on earth and all you need to know. And so that this ability, and that's what mindfulness is. It's walking on the earth and kissing the ground with your feet with each step that you take and becoming aware of it. He talks frequently about being able to find beauty in just drying a dish. Yeah, a lot of people sit down, and while they're while they're sitting down for a meal, they're already thinking about what they're going to have for dessert, and instead of just being there in this moment. If this is the appetizer and this is the bite that I'm taking, and and this is what I'm tasting in this moment, and to find beauty in virtually everything that there is in the universe. It's a way of making the mind pure.
Every beauty which is seen here below, down here below, by persons of perception resembles more than anything else that celestial source from which we all come. Isn't that great? Every beauty that we see resembles more than anything else that source. We're talking about source, connecting to source, from which we all come. Do you see beauty? Do you see it more or less in your life? Can you find it in a homeless person urinating on the street? Can you find beauty in a cockroach? As you reach higher levels of consciousness, you begin to see, not only do you see beauty everywhere and in everything, you begin to recognize it as truth.
And, you can look around, whoever you are, listening, wherever you are on this planet right now, look out your window or look to your right or look to your left, wherever you are, in a little room someplace, or sitting on a beach somewhere, or driving in your car, or whatever it may be, and just look around. What I want to say to all of you is that, the very first step in purifying your mind and moving into higher levels of consciousness and recognizing the eternal, infinite consciousness that you are, is to look at beauty in the world and see it in as many places as you can. And if you're a writer, you write a poem about it. I mean, there's 3 or 4 poems in there right now that and if I were if Rumi were here listening, and maybe he is, maybe that was Rumi, because I have such a love affair with his poetry. Maybe it was Rumi walking across my balcony on the railing, saying, "Find beauty in me." Just one of the strangest experiences that I've had, and that all came from Thich Nhat Hanh. And since we had that experience, and since I was reading him this week, I've been finding beauty in everything, in every little bird that flies by, and every person that's out there, and every wave that shows up, and so on. I said that I would like to talk about the 3 levels of consciousness, A being individual consciousness or ego consciousness. And I said that there are 2 people inside each and every one of us. The first one is the ego. The second person inside each and every one of us is what I call the sacred or the higher self. And this sacred or higher self really doesn't care whether we win or lose or how much we get or who we're better than or how much we have. It's not interested in that. This part of us that lives in every single one of us only wants one thing. It wants us to be at peace. At peace. And it wants to choose peace. As it says in the Course in Miracles, I can choose peace rather than this. I remind myself that every day when I drive my children to school in the morning and they're fighting over who called shotgun and who gets to sit in the front and who gets to push the buttons and who listens to the rap music and who's that, Daddy's my turn this time, not, and they're going back and forth, and I just remind them, I can choose peace rather than this. And I'll say, look out or I'm going to push my button. And they say, okay. They don't want to hear that crappy music or whatever. All right? The ability to choose peace. One of the selections that was most profound in my life that I wrote an essay about for 60 Days to Enlightenment in Wisdom of the Ages was from Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian poet, from a selection called the Gitanjali, which won the Nobel Prize for Poetry and Literature in 1927. He said, I went out alone on my way to my tryst, but who is this me
in the dark. I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. The ego just wants to be right. The higher self wants to be kind, wants to be at peace. And if you can just begin to shift that, just ask yourself, as what I'm about to say, I always tell people this in counseling groups and so on, that there are 4 words, that if you learn these 4 words, they'll eliminate all conflict in all of your relationships. These 4 words are, you're right about that. No matter what it is somebody says to you, you give them that. You're right about that. Someone says, you're really a jerk. So, you're right about that. Because that doesn't make somebody right. She'll say something to me, you're supposed to be home at 7:15 and it's now 6:30. There was a time when I used to say, wait a minute, you're not my mother. I don't have to explain to you when I come home. I'm the one that's out working. And who do you think buys all these, there was all that ego stuff that was a part of my life. You've all heard those before, right? Now I just simply say, honey. She said, don't hold those 4 fingers up. I hate it when you do that. Now I notice she holds the 4 fingers up, but she's doing it one at a time. She's going like, But it's the idea that just as you're about to respond to somebody, instead of saying, well, I need to be right and I need to prove myself, I'm just going to stop. I am no longer. And every single person that operates at these higher levels that I'm describing here tonight, that I've known, they have no need to be in charge, to be right, to be dominant, to be they allow themselves to realize, as the story of Buddha, when he had someone following him around for 3 days, and all they ever did was criticize him and find fault with him all the time. Everything he said, everything he did, they found, and always what would come out of him would be this peace and this love. And finally, after 3 days, the man who was criticizing him said, I don't understand. I've done nothing but insult you for 3 days and make a fool of you, and you always respond with kindness and love. He said, how can you do that? And the Buddha said these magical words. When someone offers you a gift and you don't accept that gift, to whom does the gift belong? So if someone offers you a gift of their anger, their hatred, their insults, but you don't accept it, who owns the gift? And why would you go around being upset about something that belongs to someone else? It's not yours in the first place. That's a higher level of awareness. That's being able to choose peace.